What's going on, everybody? Gar Hoover here, and I am back and ready to break down another track. This time it's my track Wanderlust, which is a lo-fi track I made on the PO-33. My wife and I moved, which means that I finally have my own studio and I'm able to have everything out, including my electric guitars, which you can hear on this track. If you want to download any of the samples, you can get them in the description below. And with that being said, let's take a look at this track. Alright, so let's start by looking at the samples. Got that pluck sound, which you hear in the chorus. The other sound that kind of responds to it in the chorus. Both of these are made in massive, as well as this little bass note. It's kind of mini Moog sound. The other two, I kind of put some weird delays on, just to give it a strange kind of spatial vibe that's different than the rest of the instruments, which felt pretty grounded for the most part. Then, of course, you've got our drums. And you can hear they're pretty lo-fi feeling and sounding. I made sure to EQ them so that they kind of hit a certain point where the lows are taken out and some of the highs that gives it that lo-fi feel. And then I've got the guitar riff. Now, this guitar riff I recorded in Logic and then just put in here after applying some effects, kind of giving it that warbly lo-fi vibe. And then finally, I have the bird sounds, which we have playing throughout the intro of the track, which we're going to take a look at next. All right, so let's start by listening to the intro of the track. So as you might have been able to tell by following the patterns up there, this is only 4 patterns total, but the looping guitar part is actually going across 4 patterns. But you can't have it re-trigger every single pattern, so I found a kind of small hack that I could use because I knew the length of the pattern was in sync with the tempo of the song, which is at 82 BPM. And what I did was I triggered the guitar on the first step of the first pattern, and I just have that go 1 time. And then I trigger this one 3 times so that we have a 4-bar loop, and when I hit play, it triggers the start of the sample. And because there's nothing else to trigger it on the second pattern and it's able to loop around, it just continues to extend and keep playing through it until it gets re-triggered again when it loops back around finally to that first pattern. And the same thing is applying every single time that I am using this guitar loop at its full length. Same with this, patterns 3 and 4. I just have it triggered on 3, and then 4 just keeps getting looped around. As you heard there, because I only clicked it once, it jumped back and restarted the pattern. But if you listen to just pattern 4, it's just the beat and the birds. There's no guitar because the guitar is getting triggered on that first pattern, which is 1 and 3, and then it just loops 3 times on 2 for the first time around and 3 times on 4 the second time around. So, with that being said, let's listen for what's going on with these birds, which I have triggered just 1 time on each pattern so that it's a clean loop, and it kind of gives the birds a rhythmic feel. So it's triggered again, and it gets triggered again every time the pattern goes around. You hear that? So when the guitars are out, you can hear that part, and it's just this clean loop of this bird sample. And it starts with that main bird tweet that you hear, and it kind of helps keep it almost in rhythm with the song, which is really cool when nature and music can kind of coincide like that. And then next, once I have it looping around, and it does that, and then we put the beat in, you can hear the beat is pretty simple. It's nothing too crazy. It's a pretty basic lo-fi beat. What you got going on here, I just have my kicks. You can hear and see kick is on 1, and then 10 and 11, and then the snare is on 5 and 13. which is classic lo-fi. If you want to look at more videos or things having to do with lo-fi where I'm breaking those down, you can check them out up here. But this is a very standard pattern that you'll see a lot in my songs just because of the limitations of the PO-33 and the simplicity of lo-fi drums. If we're being honest, they aren't that complicated. But I have a little bit of swing so that anything on the second column and the fourth column are going to get shifted back slightly so it gives it that bounce and that rhythm to it, which you'll hear if I just play it. You hear that? If I go to, sorry, I turned the wrong knob. There we go. You hear how that second kick, it seems a lot cleaner, but now if I crank it all the way, you can hear that swing really kicking in there. And so you can see that's the drums. The drum pattern is near the same thing, that same kick and snare rhythm the entire song. So it's pretty simple. And that, I think, is going to do it, other than we know that the bird sounds are going to cut out once the rest of the music kicks in at the verse. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog in the background. He is causing problems. Check this out. You hear how the birds stop? It's a clean stop. They don't trail into the next sample. What I did was create a small choke. And what I mean by that is, see how this sample, it just goes? I made this final sample 16 short enough and trimmed it so it's so small that I can just cut it and it will stop the sample completely. So I have it on the 16th step of the pattern. And so it just stops clean, and that allows the rest of the instruments to come in, because the PO-33 can only have 4 things going at once. And so you need to be careful to not let other samples or sounds trail into another pattern where they're not going to be used. And those kind of making those small chokes is crucial for that. And with that being said, let me let my dog outside, and then we'll get into the verses. All right, I am back, and let's take a listen to the verse. All right, so first things first, the guitar loop is the exact same. I have it triggered on the first pattern, which is 5, and then never touching it until it comes back around again. It just runs through its full length of that sample, and it is good to go because it is in sync, because it is 82 BPM. And with that, then we can look and we hear also the drums are a little more energetic than they were. So with that, as you can hear, there's a difference in the kicks. And that's because I layered the shaker on top of the kick sample in Logic before I imported it, so that when I want to switch over and have a shaker layer on top of the rest of my drums, I have instances where there's a shaker over it so that I can still have that energy that plays into it. And so if we look at this, the snares are simple. They have the shaker on them, and then the kicks. We have a kick here and then a kick on 11, as I had mentioned, same kick pattern, and then a kick on 10. But the kick on 10 does not have the shaker on it. You can tell the difference in the sound. And so that helps keep this feel like there are a lot more layers going on, when in reality, all of my drums are on one channel, which is super great. And then I have the shakers that are just a clean shaker filling in the gaps. So for this style of lo-fi, for a more simple and clean beat, it's good, especially on the PO-33, putting shakers or hi-hats just on the vertical first row and the vertical third row, and just going like that. And that's how you get those nice feel. And you can hear there's other things going on as well that I add in. So I've got this little crackle sound on 12. And it just kind of adds a little more swing and bounce to it, which is great on the second pattern. And then on the third pattern, which is pattern 7, we have another kind of snare sound that's taking place on the offbeat. So it kind of gives it that nice bounce still, and it's kind of playful, but not too energetic or hip-hop feeling. It's much more of that lo-fi feel. And then the final pattern is just nice and clean so that we're good to go, and it's easy to loop around and easy on the ears. The next thing that we have that's going on that you can hear that's pretty involved here is you can see we've got the snare and the guitar and the drums, but we have the bass line, which is going crazy, which is kind of carrying the melody for the verses, and it does a great job. But really what I'm doing is just following along with the chords themselves. So I'm playing the root note, the third of the chord, the fifth of the chord, and sometimes the 7th or the 11th of the chord to try and add some intrigue. So I'm kind of outlining what the chords are as the guitar is kind of plucking at the chords as well. So it's giving it additional context. But the rhythm for the bass, it stays pretty consistent. You'll see that if we look at these patterns. So the first pattern, it's 1, 4, 7, 9, 15. So it kind of has that kind of bouncy vibe going on. And I maintain that first initial bass line where it's doom, dum for each one of them, because the 1 to the 4, just to give some consistency between the patterns. But the rest of it kind of varies. So you can hear 1 through 3, they all have that initial 1-4 hit rhythmically, but they're different notes. But then the stuff following after it, there's some variation. So between pattern 6 and pattern 7, you have hits taking place on 6 and 7, and then 11 and 15. And then the same thing, you have 6 and 7, but then it goes to a similar rhythm that we saw on the first pattern. So there's some variation, but also consistency that's taking place to just keep your ear following the rhythm, and it's not random, but at the same time, it's familiar and kind of keeping your ear interested with what's going on. And then the final pattern, it's very straight. It's all notes that are going to be quarter notes on this first column, and then we have some going on in this vertical third column downward as well that are just nice and straight. It's not going to have that bounce, but it's a good resolve that kind of leads us back into the loop and where it's headed next. And that's how it loops around very nice. And with that, then we can take a look at the chorus. Okay, so let's take a look at the chorus, at least the first portion of it. And then it just loops on and on. So, first thing you can notice, the drums have additional energy that's pushing them along. Nothing too crazy that's going on here if we take a look at the drums, but you can see that every single step here is filled with something. And most of them, I am just following the same rhythm that we had done where I had the layered shakers. But in this case, any gap, anywhere where there wasn't any sound, I'm just filling it in with another shaker. So it's adding this 16th note rhythm instead, where the shakers are driving it. So you can hear that going on there, where it's this nice shaker groove that's not too energetic, but still lets us know we're in the chorus now, and it's kind of driving everything. The rest of the drums, nothing too crazy going on. It's the exact same. And the bass line is the exact same as well. So we don't even need to look at that either. The main difference between the verse, where we're following the bass line, that's kind of behaving as the melody. For this portion, the drums change, but also we have this other kind of fragile melody that's taking place. So if we listen back, we can hear the start of the melody. So you have that initial line that's kind of like a call and response. I do this a lot in my songs, especially lo-fi. I don't know why. It just makes it feel like Animal Crossing or something, and that's always a good vibe to have for your songs. So you hear it on that pattern, the first pattern, and then it's also on the third pattern, leading into the fourth. So the melody, that melody is the exact same. That's all it is. Had to try and remember it. It's been a week. But then you have the response, which is that kind of like delicate pluck that's taking place in the second and fourth patterns. Notice that rhythm, they're spaced out every, so if you have it here, it's every third. And it kind of gives it this odd, bouncy rhythm that you would have in dance music, but it plays out pretty nicely here. And it gives it that playful feel for the chorus that kind of contributes and adds to it without being too obnoxious. And so that is going to do it for that portion of the chorus. Now let's take a look at the outro. All right, let's listen to the outro. So you can hear it's the same guitar line. This time I just used the natural chops and the transients that it detected when I imported the guitar sample into the PO-33 and just chopped them up. And you can hear that pretty clearly. The kicks and the drums, the drums are the exact same in this pattern, pattern 13 and 14, as you would hear in the verses. So it's not too exciting, but lo-fi is not exciting. It's something to just sit in the background, you know? So with that, the one thing I thought that would be intriguing would be to flip the sample within its own song. And that's what you're hearing in the background there. And let's look at that sample. So you can see I've got the initial, which sounds the exact same that you would think it would just go in through the regular loop again, but then I have it getting chopped up. That's all it is. It's something like that, but I'm just using the chops that existed. I'm just adding a little bit variation in the second pattern. But you can hear it's kind of underwater. It's got that like kind of murky vibe to it that is existing. And that is, I'm just manipulating the filter of it. And I'll show you how you can do that. Let's go to the filter. So if you hit effects, you can see there's all these different settings. And I'm going to go to filter, which is FLT. And then what I'm going to do is just press play. Make sure that I'm looping. And this is the resonance, the right knob. And the left knob is the low pass control. So now I have it open the whole time. And because I was holding down right while it was taking place, it's recording in my control over the filter. If I increase the resonance, you'll be able to really tell. If you're playing live, you could actually fade something in. And as long as you hold down right and have it just looping clean, now you've got it kind of playing out like that. So that's how you can control the filter and kind of add animation to your tracks, which you don't normally get. The other thing that we can hear going on that's really simple is just the bass line. And I'm just playing the It's just 15, 16, 13, 15. And that's all it's doing, is just kind of bouncing along, not trying to show off or anything, because I wanted to show off the sample chops instead for this section. And then to kind of transition further into it being an outro, I removed the shakers for the drums for this section and made the drums the exact same as this section, which you can hear. And that kind of helps us lead into the intro again. And so it's this nice transition where you have this kind of build up to a climax and then back down, and it allows it to kind of just loop back and forth throughout the song, and it allows it to transition really clean back into the intro. Just like that. And so this is now the lowest point, and then it builds back up to where we had those drums going. And so that is going to do it for this track today. I hope that this was beneficial for you and that you learned some things. If you have any questions, of course, leave them in the comments below. I hope I can see you guys in the next video. You guys have a great week. See ya.